are you now?
Right now I'm in Paris. I'm a French dancer and choreographer. I direct since 2020 the Centre CNDC, which is the National Center for Contemporary Dance in Angers. Which maybe we'll talk more about it, but it's an institution that combines a school, a contemporary dance school, dance programming, and also a creation center where I develop my own works.
Yeah, for people who's not familiar with the French systems, maybe CNDC, especially in Angers, maybe unfamiliar to them. Can you tell us about what is included in this center, and does it include degrees or any other programs you have in CNDC Angers?
Yes, it's an institution that was created in 1978, and it's the only school in France that is really only dedicated to contemporary dance. So we have a bachelor degree, which is open to international students, or half of our students are international, coming from really all over the world. We take 20 students per every 3 years, so we do auditions every 3 years for the bachelor. Historically, it's been the school that a lot of French choreographers like Angelin Prejlocage or Rachidou Ramdan, who now directs the National Theatre for Dance in Paris, or Jérôme Bell, for example, they went to that school, and many other people. But so it's an in the French system, it's an important school for contemporary dance. And then we also have a programming season, so we welcome about 30 artists per year throughout the season, and also in a festival that takes place in March called Conversations. And we have three stages: one 900 seats, 400 seats, and 100 seats, which allows us to also show really different scales of works. And then it's in France, there are 19 choreographic centers, national choreographic centers. Angers is one of them. Also, it's a bit complex, the system, but basically it means that I'm directing this institution, but I'm also there to create my own work, to produce it, and to tour it. So all of these centers are not directed only by programmers or administrators, but by each of them is directed by an artist.
And I think that it will be interesting for people who would like to study in France about dance in the future. This time we are presenting this work, Movements Upon Movements. It sounds very interesting. Can you first tell us about this piece? What is it about, and what was your motivations to create this piece?
Well, it's actually a piece I created in 2013, and I keep performing it. So now I've been performing it a lot in different contexts. Um, I think there were several questions that led to creating this piece. One of them was an interest in gestures that we do when we talk about movements. So I was looking at gestures that dancers or choreographers or other practitioners would make when they try to explain or comment on movements somehow. And I came across this famous series of videos by William Forsythe called Improvisation Technologies, where he really um, explains and presents his approach to movement, his way of analyzing movement and of generating movement. And to do that, of course, he talks, but he also does a lot of gestures. And these gestures are not the same as a Forsyth choreography. They are really what Forsyth does when you want to explain physically his approach to movement. And there is something really intriguing in the kind of movement that you do when you want to show, like um, when you want to explain a concept or when you want to describe a movement. It's also a movement that teachers often do when they try to teach dance. And basically, I was curious if, in a way, what we can say about dance through gesture is different from what we can say about dance through words. So one part of the performance is the fact that I learned this whole series of lecture by Forsythe, all the movements, and I removed the text. So you only have the gestures, and you don't have the text which gave them their original meaning, which means that you can project also other meaning, other significations upon these gestures. And the other aspect is that I wrote a text, a kind of monologue, which I'm saying at the same time as I'm doing the gestures. So there are, in a way, there are two texts. There is the gestural text and then the spoken text. And these two texts interact. There is a kind of polyphony between them where their meaning is not exactly the same, is not at all the same, and they can interact in various ways. And the spoken text is coming from a research. I did a master in philosophy, and in my philosophy studies, I was really focused on several topics, mainly two topics. One is the kind of actions that we do when we are dancing, because it's very, in a way, if you think of all the ways of acting in daily life or in work and so on, dancing is a very special way of acting, of using our body. And so trying to describe the specificities of these actions. And another topic that interested me was to try to find a methodology to describe how movements are defined in different choreographic practices. So if you would look at movement in ballet or in Trisha Brown, it's defined in, the quality of movement is very, very different, but it's not easy to use words to describe in a precise way what's different about it, and to analyze why is it different, like what in the approach of the movement makes it different. So that's kind of the argument I'm developing as I'm making these movements. So it's a lot for the audience because they have to follow everything at the same time. It's almost impossible to follow everything at the same time. So there's a bit of a information overload. But I was really curious what would happen in letting these two discourses, the gestural one and the spoken one, interact with one another.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I find the gap between your spoken text and the gestural text very interesting to me. Like there's a discrepancy that you try to follow, but you cannot really follow everything in the moment. You mentioned that this piece has been performed in different contexts, and this time in Taipei, you're going to present in a rehearsal studio. So I'm curious about what other places and what other locations have you used in the past for this performance?
Well, I performed it in like classical black box theaters of various sizes, very small. It's a very intimate piece often. It works well in a smaller hall. I did perform it in some bigger halls. I performed it also in museum spaces, in really different settings. I performed it once in a garden, like a kind of open air theater. I performed it in universities also, or in symposiums, and this was interesting because then the expectations are very different. If you come to see that piece in a theater context, as an audience, you might be surprised that it has a lot of the characteristics of a lecture. But if you come in a university setting, then you expect a lecture and you're like, what is he doing on the floor? Like, so the expectations and the way this piece breaks, because it's really a hybrid between a lecture and a performance in some way. So the way it breaks the expectation will be different depending on the context. And I guess nowadays in museums, you really don't know what to expect, so that it doesn't break much expectations.
I see. Yeah, I think it would be very different. So, like when you are in theater, you are the audience is tend to be confined in the seat to see what's happening on the stage, whereas when you are in museums, you are kind of walking around, and sometimes you're surrounded by the audience or the visitors. So I think that I imagine it would be a very interesting and very different experience when you see this work in two very different contexts. Um, um, this time you are the only performer on stage and you have to speak and do gestures or perform at the same time. what was the major challenge, or what was the interesting parts when you are creating this piece? Do you remember anything of it?
It was very, very challenging for me because for the memory, it's really and even though I have performed it, I don't know, maybe 100 times or something like that, I can't. I still have to work a lot before for the memory, because if I would just do the text, then you have the memory of the text. If you just do the gesture, you have the physical memory of the gesture. But the combination of the two and the polyphony makes it that it's always it's always a certain. I always have to stay active in order to recall everything and to make it happen at the same time. Um, and when I at the beginning, that was really hard to integrate both lines at the same time, to find a way also to keep the rhythm of the speech free, even though I had to do the gesture. So to keep a natural and to kind of, so in order to convey the meaning of what I'm saying, I have to think about it at the same time. Otherwise, it becomes really almost like a blank, you know. So I have to mentally invest both what I'm saying and the gestures. And since they are different, autonomous, it's a bit like playing a fugue, I would say, on the piano, where you have to play several parts at the same time, and and in a way you have to, for example, if you have two melodies, you have to really find a way to sing both melodies at once. And here I have to sing both the gestures and the speech, and that's always been the main challenge. Another challenge when I was doing it is that Forsythe's movements are quite complex, and he does a lot of tiny movements uh, going with his speech. And I tried to be really as rigorous as I could in learning the movements as they were. And that was also quite challenging to learn. But then when I did the piece, I wrote to Forsythe to ask if he was okay with the project. And he was really nice. He said, yes, of course. And he invited me to come to Frankfurt at the time just to see rehearsals and so on. And since then, he has seen the piece twice, and it's always been very intimidating to perform it with him in the audience, because it's his movements in some way, you know. So, but that was quite a funny experience.
Yes. Yeah, that was part of my question as well. So, like, I was wondering if have William Forsythe actually see this performance before. So it's interesting to see that. Well, so what was his reactions after he saw the performance regarding to the technologies and the movement created by him?
Yeah, he was very enthusiastic. Actually, the second time I performed it, it was him that programmed it. Like, so he had basically not so long ago in ZKM, the Zentrum for Kunst und Media, which is in Karlsruhe in Germany. It's the institution that developed the improvisation, that produced in improvisation technologies in the first place. They created a new website around the improvisation technologies, and for the launch of the website, they did a whole Forsyth exhibition and program. And Forsyth invited me in that context to perform that piece, and then to have a talk with him about the improvisation technologies. And this was even more intimidating because there was like almost a whole ex-Forsyth company being there. So that, but I think also what was interesting to me is that this way of using the improvisation technologies is not at all. It's very strange, like, because the improvisation technologies are more meant to be watched, and then you can use this concept in order to improvise your own sequences and so on. But the idea of reproducing the movement as they are is very, very far from the initial concept of the improvisation technologies. But I think that's what Forsyth liked in some way, that it was a very strange and kind of unexpected way of using this material somehow. And yeah, and I think he's also very generous with how people can appropriate his work and transform it or take it somewhere else. So I think that it was a very nice way to meet him somehow.
So this piece is inspired by his improvisation technologies. So when you are performing, are there still improvisation inside, or you try to stay rigorous with all your texts and your gestures aligned with what you have planned?
No, there is no improvisations. It's completely set. And in some way, I would say it's like a quotation from the. It's really, in fact, I used the improvisation technologies, but not uh, because I wanted to use the concepts inside the improvisation technologies to develop movement. So it's in a way it's not completely, it's not really inspired by the improvisation technologies. It's more like somehow repurposing the improvisation technologies, because what I'm interested in the most is, so maybe he will show a dance movement and then he will talk, and when he talks he will do movements to like explain something, and these are not what you do when you do the improvisation technologies. Normally you don't reproduce the movements he does to explain it. This is a kind of it's maybe what I'm most interesting is the meta language or the meta gesture, you could say, that Forsythe does when he explains the improvisation technologies rather than the improvisation technologies themselves. So for example, you can do a improvisation technologies workshop with Forsythe dancers, and then you really do the tasks. I'm not doing the task at all. I am reproducing the meta language that was generated when explaining the task somehow.
Mm-hmm. Um, this piece is for me is quite unusual or quite special because it's very different from what I'm used to watch when I see dance performance or dance pieces. For people in Taiwan who may not be familiar with your works in the past, are there any recurring elements or ideas that you regularly use in your works, consciously or unconsciously?
Um, if they are unconscious, it would be hard for me to,
Well,
but
in
let me
hindsight,
say,
maybe.
you're right, you're right, you're right. No, well, I must say, movement on movement is quite is not really representative of my work in general. It's quite a
Mhm.
specific work. The rest of my work is more focused on developing a specific approach to movement. I would say the it so, and this approach to movement is based on practical goal. In fact, during camping, I will also give a workshop, and in this workshop, I will share this approach to movement, and it's based on an analysis of the way movement is defined in previous um, um, choreographic practices. So the text that I'm saying in Movement on Movement was really important. This kind of reflection in finding my own way of developing movement, and basically, as a dancer, I first studied ballet in France and in Canada, and then I went to parts in Belgium, in Brussels, which is a contemporary dance school, and this was and basically this meant that I kind of I studied the ballet tradition, and then some neoclassical, Balanchine, Forsyth, and so on, and then also some modern dance, Cunningham, and then in parts we did mostly postmodern dance, like Steve Paxton, Trisha Brown, Enter the Kersmaker, and I basically I got really curious about these differences in movement approaches, and if I had to be really schematic, I would say that for me, when I tried to develop my own approach to movement, there were two main references. One was the postmodern tradition, kind of culminating in Trisha Brown's work, and in that tradition, in Trisha Brown's work, um, again, this is a simplification, but I would say that movement is defined mechanically. So in terms of forces, inertia, gravity, muscular strength, acting on the mass of the body. And you try to really experience these forces as you do the movement. And in the other big tradition of like ballet, neoclassical, modern dance, Cunningham, Forsythe. Movement is more defined geometrically, so in terms of lines, angles, trajectories, and so on. And I tried to develop another approach to movement that would not be only geometrical or only mechanical, but based on more a certain use of energy. And this use of energy is made precise by the use of um, goal-oriented action, like hitting or avoiding or throwing. And basically, I use these action verbs, but I try to create distortions so that the audience cannot recognize these goals. So, for example, the dancers hit imaginary object around them. They use body part that you cannot normally use to hit something like fragile body part, like the rib cage or the throat, the inside of the arm. They use combinations of direction that could not happen in daily life, and but they still really try to have the motivation of hitting these objects as they do the movements. And this is going to be the same for avoiding or throwing and so on. And this means that you still perceive the sequence of movement as a dance sequence, as a movement sequence, not as mime or as a narrative. But the quality of movement, the kind of acceleration you will have in the movement, the kind of energy, the even the affects, the emotions that goes with it are it would be very, very hard to define them without using these action verbs. So if I do a, sorry, I don't know if you can see, but if I do a movement like that with my hand, if I think of hitting something here, it will give a very specific quality. And if I think of avoiding something here, it will create like a similar movement, like in space, but with a different quality than if I think of hitting something here. Um, and uh, and basically, the movements are mostly about these qualities of acceleration, contraction, muscle tone, and so on. And I've been working now for about 15 years on this approach to movement, and this generated a series of pieces. Um, and the last one was in this year in 25, and I keep really exploring it. It's kind of infinite the way you can expand and work on this approach to movement.
I'm sure that audience in Taiwan would definitely love to see your other works in the futures in Taiwan, because as you described, it's very different from the piece that we're going to see in November, Movement on Movement. Back to this work, when you have performed in so many different locations and so many different contexts, what kind of audience feedback did you get? Because like every context gives you a very different experience, I'd assume.
Yes. Well, there are different reactions. Some people, uh, like so often I see the audience as I'm performing, and because I think sometimes, especially when I perform in the evening and I see people coming to a show after work, and sometimes at the very beginning of the performance, I'm a bit worried and I feel a bit sorry for them because I'm like, oh God, they probably didn't imagine they were signing up for this, right? They thought they were going to see a dance show with music and so on. And I start talking and explaining all these ideas and sometimes sometimes people even close their eyes to listen to what I'm saying because it's like so much to listen and watch at the same time. Sometimes people are really, really concentrated because they follow both at the same time, and I can really see that in their eyes. I never had people like blocking their ears so that they could not hear anymore what I said. But I'm really looking forward to seeing that one day, but it never happened. So these are real-time reactions of the audience. But I guess some people get a little bit frustrated with the performance because they feel like why is he doing both at the same time, and it would be easier to like just give the lecture or like do a dance piece but not both at the same time. Some people get excited by the play, the challenge, the polyphony, and so on. And some people also told me, some people that were really not used to going to see dance shows talked to me afterwards and said it was nice for them actually to have words and to have explanations and ideas that helps them to have entry points in watching movement. So for them, it was a good introduction in some way to contemporary dance. So it can work like that. But what other reactions did I have? Some people get somehow like, for example, I sometimes also I stop talking and I keep just the movement sequences, and then basically often people say because it goes quite fast and there are many ideas that they keep thinking about it in the next days, and sometimes they write to me afterwards. Often they ask me for the text also or the video. So yeah, it's quite it's quite varied. But I think what I had the one thing that this performance does that I never had with other performances is a lot of people asking me for the text. I think it's because when you watch it, you cannot grasp everything, but there are maybe ideas that you're like, oh, that sounds interesting, but I would like to look into it, and you don't really have you don't have time to completely process it, so you want to come back to it in some way. But it's been nice also because often when I do it, it's with subtitles, and it's an opportunity to translate that text. So this text was translated in many languages, in German, in Italian, in Spanish, I don't remember all the languages, but I do it in both French and English. So this, but and now I guess it's been translated in Chinese. So that's a great addition to it. Of course, I cannot read the Chinese translation, so I have no idea what it how. I think that's why it's really a question for me, um, because a lot of the concepts in the work are specific to the tradition of Western dance and abstract dance and so on, or concepts that I developed myself. But I have no idea how they are transformed or enriched, maybe, or shifted by the translation, by having to be explained or expressed in a really different language system, and so I think that for the audience in Taiwan, depending if they speak English or not, there are in a way three texts. It's even more polyphonic because there is my gestural text, my speech, and there will also be the text in Chinese, which will add one more level, I guess, to it.
Yes, I think that's something that we can look forward to in our discussion after the performance, because we'll have a discussions after the performance when you're in Taipei. Um, the first time when I saw the performance, I was like, why did you put these two texts and two efforts together by one person? Like, why do you have to speak and do the gesture at the same time? But gradually, I see the gap between them, and I see the interesting things that can grow out of it. Um, this time we are presenting this work in a rehearsal studio. So how would you suggest the audience to prepare themselves before coming into the show? Because like you say, this is a lecture slash performance. So should they prepare themselves as a student, or how should they prepare themselves before coming into the show?
I would say to try to stay as open-minded as possible. There is one, I mean, there are many definitions of artworks, but there is one by Marcel Duchamp, the visual artist, which I find really nice, where he says that a work of art is a rendezvous, which in French means like a meeting when you propose someone to me. It's like a date, but not an intimate date, but like like you're like, okay, let's meet, like a meeting point. Yeah, meeting point is maybe the best translation. So that a work of art is a meeting point, and I think when you come to this meeting point, it's nice to come with an open mind and to see what you can find into it. As you said, I think a lot of times, for me, there is a third text that gets generated by the viewer, which I don't control, which is that a certain gesture will come with a certain word. And the way these two things come together in the word, can generate a third meaning, maybe of opposition, or in a way they complement each other in a certain way, or they mean something else together completely. And and so yeah, I think there is this interpretative work that you can do in order to and this third text that you generate, and that is each viewer, that is unique to each spectator in some way.
Mm. I think some of the viewers can also feel the gap between movement and text now and your spoken words now because the internet disruptions sometimes we encounter that we're seeing.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I'm just curious. I'm just seeing some of this clips. I'm just in the moments, but everything's fine now. Um, have you been to Taipei before?
No, this is my first time. I'm very excited to come. It seems really an interesting, an amazing place actually.
Do you have any expectation or imaginations regarding to the city or this place?
Well, it sounds like a fascinating place. I mean, historically and culturally, I'm amazed actually. I think Taiwanese culture is quite present in France, whether it's like, Taiwanese movies, literature and so on. And so I think um, I find it really inspiring and impressive that like it's a rather a small territory, but the impact it has culturally on the world is very important. So I'm very curious to see how it came about. I also heard the collection at the museum are incredible, so I'm quite curious to try to go see them if I find the time.
Good, good. Well, I hope that you will get to see some of them. And when you are here in Taipei, we also have the Taipei Biennial, so that can be an opportunity for you to see some of the artworks that we have here in Taiwan. Um,
Mm.
you also mentioned that you are now the director of CNDC in Angers. You said that's a place that can also give you an opportunity to create your own work. But as a director, there must be some paperwork or administrative tasks you have to fulfill as well. How do you balance between administrative role and creative roles?
Well, it is sometimes a bit of a challenge, but I also have a really great team, so I'm not doing this alone. And a lot of the credit for uh, has to go to the team. And I have an amazing deputy director, Marion Colletter, and she, I'm not trying. I know it's impossible to control. I don't think you can run an institution like that by trying to control every aspect of it. So I think it's really very important to find people that you trust and that with whom you share a common vision, and to be able to work with them. So, for example, Marion is mostly in charge of the programming and the artists that we are welcoming, and because we also have a lot of artists coming in residency, we co-produce their works and so on. We have about 50 different artistic team coming every year to rehearse in CNDC. We also have Amélie Coster, who is director of the school, who is running the school program, and I also, of course, work with them very closely in thinking about it and in developing it. Sorry, but I'm not doing it alone at all. I think the other thing is it's sometimes it's quite helpful also sometimes, because I think creative work is very hard. It's very, very demanding, and it's the hardest thing I know, and it's very scary to do also, because you all the time you're trying to renew yourself and to create something that's interesting to others, and it's only when the piece meets its audience that you get to know if it's working or not, and um, and so I think for me sometimes being able to go back and forth between that really very demanding art creation and artistic work, and it's also demanding, but in a very different way. The work of really thinking, okay, how can we conceive a school that is relevant today, or what is the best way to create a good context for our dance artists to thrive in France or in Europe and so on. it in a way it gives me energy also. It's not only a weight. It's not only the weight of the paperwork and so on. It's also I get to meet so many people and to share ideas, and it's a lot of dialogues, a lot of conversations. So I think it also fuels me in some way to run this space.
I think switching between different roles can give you some different ideas sometimes. Um, this piece, as you mentioned before, have been performed in different contexts, different locations, and each kind of environments would demand different kind of attention from the audience. In the museums, people may walk around, and in the garden, you said that people may walk around between plants and see you on the floor sometimes, maybe. Uh, are there any preferred location for you to perform it for this piece?
It's a good question. I think the 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 best location is the dance studio is a very good location because when I do it in a black box theater, um, it might create it can definitely work, but it makes it a little bit more dramatic because of this setting. Whereas, and if it's really it, and the piece asks for a lot of concentration. So if it's in a museum, it can be very nice, but it's nice if it's in a place that is kind of that is closed, or that gives it that protects the works a little bit. If it's really in an open space, it's still possible, but it's harder for the audience to concentrate, and also for me. Um, but so I think a dance studio is interesting because it is a very intimate place, and it's a place that is in a way, you know what? I didn't do it so many times in dance studios, actually. I just realized. Or they were really dance studios repurposed as a stage. But in a way, this is really about, this piece is also really about the making of the dance. It's really about the process of how dances are generated. How do we share them? How do we talk about them? How do we, you know, so I think the dance studio might be a really, really good setting for it, actually.
Interesting. In this work, we highlight the word movement in the titles, and of course, there's a lot of movements in the piece as well. Are there what is the aspect of movements you want to highlight for people to take notice of, or what are the movements or the creation of movements that you want people to notice when you present in this piece?
I think one aspect that the piece highlights is how a movement changes depending on how you approach it. So a very similar movement, depending even how you watch it. If you if you look at someone doing something in the streets and you focus on what is the goal that they are achieving and are their movement efficient for that goal, it's very different than if you focus on what are the geometrical configuration that their body are generating in space. And this is going to shift radically your experience. Or if you watch the way their weight shifts and the forces that are at play. And I think this create different windows, like different ways of watching, and and it's the same when you're moving. It's a bit similar, depending the way of approaching your own movements as you're doing them. It will really trigger different experiences and different dances in some way. And when we think about different movements, sometimes we think about different sequences of movement. And here I'm more thinking, okay, even one sequence can be approached in many different ways that will change it more radically than just changing the patterns of the movements somehow. So the one thing is the patterns of the movement, but another is the mindset, or the body mindset, if you could say, with which you approach it. And that's in a way what I'm trying to I'm trying to call the audience attention to these shifts of perspective that you can have on movement and the shifts in the experience of movement that it can generate.
I think it's a very fascinating process to think about how movement are created and what are the goals and objectives of these movements. As a side note, when you travel, do you observe people's body language of their movements on the street, or trying to imagine what they're doing and why they are doing?
Well, I do think you can, in some way, there are you can choose to look at anything as a dance. I think if you want, you can. I think the dance is in the eye of the beholder in some way. Of course, you can propose something as a dance for someone else, but if you watch kids playing in a playground, or even animals moving, or people, I don't know, just even having a drink or something, and you watch, in a way, their movements are so incredibly complex and subtle. Even the movement of taking a glass, if you think about it, the way the eyes, the fingers open, the way the coordination of the fingers, the way they will prefigure the shape of the glass before the glass is reached. It's all movement that we do without thinking about it, but that are incredibly more complex than any dance we could come up with somehow. So I think there is a certain point of view in which you can, in a way, by looking at something as a dance, you can unfold the richness of its movement. But I think then it also depends on what tools you have in your eyes, almost. How much, if you have many ways of watching it, then you can make that little personal performance that you're generating for yourself just by watching any movement much richer. It's also your ability to taste movements that matters in some way. But this is true of many things, like I guess if you're a great if you know tea very well, you will be able to perceive many things in the tea that I can't, because I like tea, but I don't know tea well, so I cannot appreciate really, subtleties and so on. And I think a lot of the richness of the experience of art is not only in what is being proposed, but on the in a way the richness of the experiential abilities of the person taking it in, or perceiving it somehow. And so expanding these abilities, or like expanding the range of what we can perceive and feel, is, for me, is the main purpose of art in some way, expanding what we are able to feel. And I think that's also important in terms of cultural dialogues, because depending on your culture and how you were brought up and so on, you're attuned to different things. So, growing up in France, you get to know wine better than tea. It's maybe not as good for your health, but still, if you know wine, then a bit you know the kind of grapes, you know the kind of person, which the year in which maybe it was warm, so it's more sugar in the grapes, more alcohol, and it's all these emotions coming together, and all these layers. Um, and if you after a while, and so if you want to empathize with someone else, be able to have a rich relationship, and to also create, a fulfilling relationships, you have, in a way, to put yourself in their own experiential field. To be able to do that completely, this is impossible. But you can go a certain way, you can create a bridge. And I think art can also create that bridge by allowing us to expand what we can experience, what we can feel, and to have a little bit, accessing someone else's experience, and then having more empathy, more sympathy, more bound with that person. And I think we really need that to live together, actually, and to live together, and to go beyond our differences somehow.
I think yes. Well, I think we definitely welcome all kinds of ways of seeing things from a different perspective. I recall that one artist told me that when you start to learn about art and you get to see the world from the artist's eye, you can never see things in the same way because there's always something in your mind that started to connect different points and then generate something else that can be very different from people who without any artist background. Um, but that was a very interesting point to see that because people may come from different cultural experiences and they will see your work in a very different ways, especially when uh, they have your French spoken words and your gestures and the Chinese subtitles all at the same time. That can be overwhelming to them. Uh, Speaking of cultural experiences and backgrounds, you mentioned you have a philosophy degree. How does that degree or those learning experience influence your choreography?
Um, I think it gave me tool to reflect, reflexive tools, and actually, movement on movement is it's kind of a reflexive title. Like, yeah, it's what can movement tell us about? It could have been movement about movement, but it's movement on movement was nicer. So, um, but I think um, the other thing that I I find helpful in philosophy, one is that it can be about anything actually, and that it gives you tool to just try to reflect on things that you're doing without thinking about them. Uh, so when you're dancing, there are many things that are spontaneous, that come more or less naturally, and sometimes they are very complex processes, and sometimes trying to make them, to reflect upon them, to try to categorize them a little bit, or to organize them, or to make them more explicit. It gives you idea. It gives you you realize, oh, if I try to categorize what has been done with movement in such and such ways, there is this and that and that, and there seems to be another option that has not been explored yet. But you would not think of that other option if you didn't categorize the for example, the dance heritage you're working with in that way. So I think it can be useful tool to organize what you're doing and see different options. I also think in some way everyone is doing philosophy at a level of or another, in the sense that we are all reflecting on our own actions. Like, I guess anyone who is doing something regularly will start to wonder about that thing, or will start to have some point of view or ideas about what they are doing. And I guess for me, that is the birth of philosophy. That's the first germ of philosophy somehow. And then it can be developed to like great scales and systems and so on. But I also think there is for me another relationship between philosophy and dance, which is that when you're doing philosophy, you're not trying to solve a problem. It's not like engineering, or like, you in a way, usually when you think, it's because you have a problem to solve. You want to build something, and you wonder how to make sure that it's gonna not fall, or you want to go somewhere and you wonder what's gonna be the fastest way to get there, or you want to convince someone and you wonder what are the best arguments to convince that specific person. But when you're doing philosophy, in some way you let go of that goal of using thinking in order to achieve a specific goal, and you focus on thinking itself. You're like, suddenly you use thinking in order to try to make sense of what you're doing when you're doing thinking, when you're using thinking, as usual, to solve something. I hope that sentence was somewhat clear, but let me rephrase it. Usually you use thinking to solve something, and in philosophy, instead of using thinking to solve a specific problem, you use thinking in order to analyze and to observe what thinking itself is, I would say. And in dance, it's a bit similar. When we use our bodies, usually it's in order to achieve some practical goals. We open the door, we type on the computer, we a glass or something like that. But in dance, your movements are not achieving any goals in some way. Suddenly, you use your body and you move, but what you're interested in is the movement itself. So in both cases, you let go of the goal for a moment to focus on the process of moving or on the process of thinking. And that's very enriching in both cases. So I think that there is a similarity between dance and philosophy in this kind of reflexivity that philosophy is thinking about thinking in some way, and dance is movement for the sake of movement. So there is a similarity for me there.
So movement about movement is something that we would definitely look forward to. I think our time is almost up. Before we go, are there any things you would still like to talk to us about this piece, or something you would like to highlight that I have missed so far?
Um, Let me see. Well, no, I think we have covered most of it. I'm sure other things will come up when people see the piece. There are also some moments that I find quite funny in the piece. I hope the audience will find them funny too. Like just a few moments. There are also moments that changed meaning because I created it in 2013. And in the piece also, that's maybe good to say, there are a lot of there are other texts that are quoted. There is a long interview between Ivan Rainer and Trisha Brown that's quoted. There are you know short text by Simon Forti. So it's almost like there are different voices also in the piece that goes through me. It's not only my text, it's also inside the text there are other texts that are quoted. Um, and um, I think this whole, so in a way it's for me it's a conversation with all the figures I'm calling, like Forsythe, Simon Forti, Trisha Brown, Merce Cunningham. I talk also a lot about ballet, so it's a whole conversation with this dance history somehow.
Yes, I think I didn't know that this piece was created in 2013. I think over this year that the global context have changed. We've been to the pandemic, so I think that people, when it comes to movement now, people may have a different ideas and different attitudes and approach toward movements nowadays. So once again, thank you for spending the time with us. We all look forward to your performance on November 18th and 19th. And for everyone who haven't bought the tickets, I think the ticket is running very low now. The last time I checked, there's only one single digit left. So if you want to purchase it, this is a good time to do so. Once again, thank you, Nuit, for your time, and we look forward to see you in Taiwan.
Thank you very much, and have a good day. I look forward to meet you in Taiwan. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's all the time we have for this online sessions. And if you want to catch Campaign Asia, that will happen in November in Taipei Performing Arts Center. We look forward to see you in Taipei.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.